Thank you. And with this, I'm going to introduce our moderator for the evening, Attorney John Zettlemore.
How are you all?
I have this. This is working, I think. And that's for them. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Some of you know me, and I know some of you, and some of you do not know me. But I've done this before for CEPTA. Hope I don't mess it up this time. But anyway, our program is going to be conducted in this fashion. We have just, let me get out from in front of you. We have just two candidates tonight. There was a third, but I believe that candidate has withdrawn. Is that, where did Otto go?
Yes, that's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So our candidates tonight are Justin Simmons, who you know, he is currently the State House representative from this district, which is the 131st district. And the district includes Emmaus, just so some of you, if you don't know, Emmaus, it includes part of Montgomery County, the upper part of Montgomery County, like Pennsburg, East Greenville, Hanover Township. Correct me if I'm incorrect about any of that. And it includes part of Upper Bucks, I believe. No, Northampton County.
Lower Saucon.
And
Lower
Saucon in Northampton, and only Lower Saucon. Okay. And the rest of the municipalities in Lehigh County or what?
Lower Milford, Coopersburg Borough, Emmaus,
Okay.
Salisbury, 3-1.
Okay. The 3rd and 1st districts in Salisbury, is that what you said?
Precinct 3-1.
Okay.
Small little.
Okay. So some of you may be from some of those municipalities, and some of you may be from Emmaus as well. But in any event, just so you know that they're the candidates, and I believe, Mr. Simmons, where do you reside?
Upper Saucon.
Okay, Upper Saucon Township. And Ms. Pelosi, hold on, don't do this, Bowser, and where do you reside?
East Greenville.
East Greenville. So you're from Lehigh County, and you're from Montgomery County. Okay. So the format tonight is going to be simply this. The candidates will each have 5 minutes to make an opening statement. After that opening statement, there will be questions that can either be asked from the audience, and I have, I think, 3 that are already prepared, which I will read. Both candidates will be given an opportunity to answer the question. Even if you direct it to only one of them, we will permit the other to answer as well. They'll have 1.5 minutes to answer. And after we're finished with the questions, then we will go to a closing statement.
Excuse me. If anybody has a question from the floor that is not prepared, come and line up here on the microphone.
Okay. Okay, so we'll have a closing statement that again will be 5 minutes long. You will get a warning signal when you get within 30 seconds of the end of your time. So just recognize that warning signal, and it's right there in front of you. And once the orange is raised, your time is up. So when you see the first one, make sure you're doing something to try to wind up your statement or your answer to the question. So we haven't decided who's going to go first. I don't have a coin either, so I can't flip a coin. Does anyone have a coin? We'll do this real. I'm sorry?
Would you introduce the other candidate, please?
I did. I'm sorry. I'm Mr. Simmons, who most of you know, and this is Bev Pelosi Bowser. She is a candidate as well, and she is from East Greenville in Montgomery County. Okay? Anything else that anyone wants to bring to my attention? Okay. All right. So, does someone have a coin? Does anyone carry coins around with them anymore? Or do we all use to should I flip a credit card? That's how money usually goes, right through my fingers. Okay. Are you ready? Why don't you call it? Heads or tails? Heads. Now let me touch that. It's tails. Do you want to go first or second?
I will go second.
Okay, the floor is yours. Now I'm walking away with somebody's coin. Almost made a quarter. Is it working?
The red button on the bottom, the numbers come on.
Is now it's on?
No. Let me see.
Is this the button?
Yes.
Hello?
Let me see that.
No, that was going.
John, where are you? Here it is. I just pressed this and that yellow light came on.
Is this? Is any better?
One more point of order question for the moderator.
Yes.
When Justin goes second, this time I go first, next time it's his turn to
Yes.
go first, we swap? Okay,
We'll do that. Okay?
all right.
And I'll try to keep track of that, but you can help me as well.
Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. My name is Bev Plosa-Bowser. I have my 5 minutes here to make my introductory comments. First and foremost, I would like to thank this Concerned East Penn Taxpayers Association for hosting this debate. I appreciate the help of John Donchez initially, who I contacted, and Otto for pulling this together, and all the folks that are involved here. Greatly appreciate the fact that every one of you in this room has come out on this night that has been full of weather warnings. And so I hope everyone as well gets home safely tonight, because it is getting dangerous out there. It was sleet coming down as we came in. So my name is Bev Plosa-Bowser. I am running for state representative in the 131st. I'm a retired Air Force colonel. I spent 30 years in the Air Force, but let me go back before my Air Force time and let you know that I'm a Pennsylvania native. I grew up in Montgomery County and Bucks County, and my family is all over the area. Actually, on the north end of the district in Lower Saucon, I originally owned a home back in 1995 to 2005. So I have been familiar with this area, with Pennsylvania, for so many years, even though I was away doing military duty for more than 30 years. I've got family that lives all around, up in Lehigh County, over in Northampton County, in Bucks County, still in Quakertown, and now we're in Montgomery County. We're holding down the fort all the way around southeastern Pennsylvania. What else can I tell you? In the beginning of this adventure to run in the 131st, I was invited to run by HRCC. The House Republican Campaign Committee came to me and said, "We would like you to run for this office." That's when my opponent was actually declared to run for US Congress. At one point then, there was an article that came out and talked about how Justin had missed some time attending votes, and he changed his mind and decided to run for the office here. He gave me a call and asked me to step out of the race, but I declined to do that. I had thought about it. By then I'd put 6 weeks or more into putting this campaign effort together. And what I learned was that the voters in the 131st district want change, that they need something new. So I decided that I would stick with it. It has been an adventure so far. There are many things that I'm learning along the way. There are many people that I'm meeting along the way, because I have been away from home for a number of years serving in the Air Force. So I appreciate this opportunity very much. It gives me a chance to come before you so that you can get to know me better, and I can get to know you. I do want to acknowledge one person here in the audience that I haven't done just yet. And I'd like to just introduce my husband, Cameron, my wonderful companion here for life. He's been with me for many, many years. We have raised 5 children. We now enjoy the wonderful experience of having 4 grandchildren, and they're all under age 4 years old. So it's been quite an interesting time. So I will wait then for the rest of the questions to answer and to fill in more details as we go.
Thank you, Beverly, and I think one of the first things I would like to do is thank Beverly for her service to our great country. Certainly, people that serve our country here and abroad deserve the utmost respect, so Beverly, thank you for your service. Otto and John Donchez and the rest of the crew, thank you very much for putting together this event tonight. I would like to open up and talk about this race because, in my opinion, what this race comes down to is a proven conservative reformer in myself against someone who is an unproven, untested candidate who is being supported by factions in the Upper Perkiomen School District that support a $60 million middle school that want to raise our school property taxes. That's what this race comes down to, a proven, effective, conservative reformer and someone you want to take a risk on who's being supported by liberal Republicans. My record is clear. I've been on the front lines of opposing over $8 billion in tax increases by Governor Wolf that he has proposed, and we have been successful in that endeavor. I have voted no against the largest gas tax increase in the history of Pennsylvania. That was under Republican control, so that did not make me popular within my own party. I voted to pass real pension reform that helps lower our school property taxes. I have led the fight to change Harrisburg just last week by voting to reduce the size of the legislature. Pennsylvania has the largest full-time legislature in the United States. Our legislature is twice the size of Texas, even though we're half the size. I've also done this while refusing to take the pension, the per diems, the state car, and all the other perks afforded to legislators. I voted to get the state out of the liquor business. I'm pro-life and I'm pro-Second Amendment, as evidenced by my endorsement by the National Rifle Association and the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation. I've been the author of a bill that gives taxpayers a say in how their tax dollars are spent on public-private projects like sports stadiums. And I am a co-sponsor and proud supporter of HB 76, which eliminates school property taxes over a period of 4 years. Now, I understand, as my opponent brought up in her opening statement, that my attendance record will be brought up tonight. And I want to make it clear. Over the last 7 years, I've missed on average of 4 session days per year. A third of my absences have been due to the birth of my child, my wedding, and my honeymoon. The rest of my absences have been due to an ailment that I've had since I was a young child, that is obsessive compulsive disorder. My attendance rate is 93%. The average legislator's attendance rate is 95%. I certainly do recognize that I need to do better, but I will say this. I do hope that my opponent does not align with the liberal press in exploiting a mental health condition that millions of Americans suffer from, including thousands here in the 131st District. I'd also like to talk about my legislation that I've gotten passed and signed into law. I've had 6 pieces of legislation signed into law since I've been in the legislature. Act 160 of 2012, which I brought up in my opening statement, gives voters a say on how their tax money is being spent on items like sports stadiums. Act 143 of 2014 is my bill that qualifies homeless youngsters aged 3 and under for tracking services, allowing them to receive critical early intervention services, saving taxpayer dollars in the long run. And Act 2 of 2017, which provides civil immunity to school bus drivers and crossing guards who administer epinephrine shots, or EpiPens. I was also one of the authors of Act 39, which was the historic liquor reform that we had passed here in Pennsylvania. My legislation allowed universities like DeSales to have wine auction permits to help fund their endowment. I've also named highways in the district for fallen soldiers and fallen police officers, including Officer Petzel. I've also brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars in state tax dollars to our district, $500,000 for crosswalk improvements in Coopersburg, $200,000 for intersection improvements on Route 309, $260,000 for sewer improvements right here in Emmaus, $500,000 to the Emmaus Public Library, $990,000 for intersection improvements at Route 309 and Lanark Road in Coopersburg, and hundreds of thousands of dollars for area fire and ambulance companies. This is my record, and it's a proven record versus someone that I believe is untested. I would also like to point out tonight that my wife, Erica, of 6 years, is here in the audience. Unfortunately, our daughter could not make it tonight. My in-laws are watching, our little daughter, Reagan. That is all for me in my opening statement. Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't know if I'm on. Yes, I am on. Thanks. Okay, so we're going to entertain some questions, and maybe I'll start with the first one. I have 4 that people wrote out in cards. If you want to ask a question, you can come up here, as Otto said, and use the mic, which is not here. John's going to bring the mic back. The mic's not working?
I'm gonna need to test it again or something.
All right. So, since
This one working, yes, okay.
since Ms. Pelosa Bowser went first, this question is for both of you, but I'll ask Justin to answer it first. Since Senate Bill 1285 was passed, do you believe Senate Bill 1285 is going to help in passing Senate Bill 76 or hurt the chances of it being passed? Why or why not? Maybe you'll explain. I think I'm off again. Maybe
Yes.
you'll explain what these 2 bills are very quickly.
Yes, Senate Bill 1285 is the constitutional amendment legislation that allows homeowners to exempt 100% of their property taxes rather than the current 50%. That constitutional amendment was brought in front of the voters in the last election, and it passed overwhelmingly. The question is, do I think this will help the passage of HB 76? Absolutely. The movement for property tax, not only property tax reform, but property tax elimination, is really gaining steam here in Pennsylvania. As I stated in my opening statement, I'm one of the sponsors, or excuse me, co-sponsors of HB 76. Now, we only have, there are over 100 co-sponsors on HB 76, but I want you to hear something I'm about to tell you here. A couple years ago, we had a vote on HB 76. There was what they called a discharge amendment that forced people to get on the record to vote on HB 76. When that vote came up for a vote, only about 52 members voted for HB 76, even though the bill had 100 co-sponsors. So I will again state that if you are a supporter of HB 76, you want someone who is committed, who's a co-sponsor of the bill, who's not only a co-sponsor of the bill, but has demonstrated commitment by voting for that piece of legislation. And I was able to vote for that piece of legislation.
I just find it easier to stand up. I don't necessarily always want to walk around the front of the table just because it's harder to see. There's not, when we're sitting down, it makes me short. Yes, I do think that House Bill 76 is important. I do think that it is something that should be passed. I do know that my opponent has worked on that for several years, but it hasn't actually happened. So I'm not sure how much strength or effort there is behind that effort. I do think that it's something that has been worked on. We've got to get a reform to Pennsylvania taxes, but it hasn't actually happened. It's been promised. So to me, it sounds like more words, just words, not actual accomplishment.
Since no one has come up here, I'll ask another question, and we'll have you answer it at first, okay? The Morning Call recently reported on local elected officials receiving preferential treatment and massive property tax cuts not available to most of the people they represent under the Clean and Green Act. I would like to know if either of you take advantage of this program, and if you do, what is it that you farm under the Clean and Green Act?
The Clean and Green Act, I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of the Clean and Green Act, but somebody taking massive tax cuts, I don't think is appropriate.
And just maybe a very short summary. The Clean and Green Act is a statute that allows people to put their land, their farmland, into a program where they cannot then use it for development and receive a tax cut in doing so. Is that correct, Mr. Simmons? As
I
a
think you mean
summary?
Act 319,
Yes.
that it was referred to originally as Act 319 when it was passed. Yes, people who
But
own
I'm
homes.
just reading someone else's question.
Right.
So I'm answering yes to that. If that's not correct, then I'd like to know.
Okay. All right, well, I'm seeing other head nods here, so I'm pretty sure that's what we're referring to. Act 319 is when homes that are on more than 10 acres have the ability to claim Act 319 and pay for the home. And it isn't a requirement to farm anything. It's a requirement to keep the land preserved and not to subdivide. It's hard to hear you, sir. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify. Clean and Green has three categories. You can farm it with a certain amount of things or preserve it for the land. Oh, it's not just what you described. Yeah,
Okay.
that's inaccurate.
But it includes preserving the land, and that's the one I'm referring to.
Well, it's one of three. It should be accurate. That's correct.
Okay. Ooh, I think I'm at my yellow time there.
Yes, it is, and you're not required to farm.
The land.
Well, it's the farm.
Okay.
No, there's not a requirement to farm.
Did she answer the question?
She did not.
I didn't think so.
Is your
But,
land under Clean and Green?
but,
Is your land under-
okay, can you hear me? It's her answer. And if you have a different question for her on that particular issue, come up here and ask the question. But first of all, Mr. Simmons is going to answer. Okay. Okay.
I do not. I own about an acre of property, so I don't even qualify for it. But Ms. Bowser, she does qualify for it. This is her deed right here. She gets preferential treatment on the property that she owns. So she does claim Clean and Green on the 10 acres that she does own. So she gets a property tax discount that many of us don't receive.
Okay. Do you want to?
Can I do a different?
Yeah, you can do. You can. Oh, you want to do a different question?
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Can I do a different question?
Yes.
Guys, Justin, hello. We met before, so I take that acknowledgement as full disclosure. My question for you guys is, what is your opinions for fiscal accountability, mainly balancing budgets in relation to mainly the school boards? You're a pro-school, pro-spending, spend and tax, which is what's happening now. And I don't know what your position is per se, but what is your guys' position on getting through this issue with a lot of the school districts being in fiscal trouble?
Mr. Simmons.
We have a problem with spending here in Pennsylvania, and it's a huge problem. And one of the big problems that we do have is with our school boards here in Pennsylvania. That's why I just authored a piece of legislation that will stop the allowance of cross-filing of school board members. Right now, at least where we live here in Southern Lehigh, we have radical left-wing liberals that run for school board that run on the Republican ticket because they're allowed to cross-file. They then get on the school board and it's like the chickens guarding the hen house. It needs to change, and that's why I'm supporting this piece of legislation my own piece of legislation to stop the cross-filing of school board candidates. That being said, we also need to, at the state level, rein in spending. You know, I have consistently said since I've been in the legislature that we need an across-the-board 10% spending cut in every department in Pennsylvania to balance our budget. Unfortunately, there are Republicans that my opponent has surrounded herself with, that continue to fight us tooth and nail every time we try to do things like this. So while you get criticized on your record for not being able to get things done, the fact is a lot of the reasons why we aren't able to get things done is because of the Republicans I serve with that, again, support my opponent, that fight any type of spending reductions. We should have zero-based budgeting in Pennsylvania. Basically, every department should come in front of the Appropriations Committee every year at zero and come in and prove why they need the amount of money they have. Right now, they don't have to come in at zero. They have to come in and at last year's appropriation and explain why they need a raise. We need zero-based budgeting, and we need performance-based budgeting at the state level.
Your time is up.
First, I just want to clear up something. I'm not quite sure what Justin is referring to. These people I've surrounded myself with, I do know that the last time that we had a vote in Upper Hanover, there was an issue about our school. And I talked with Rayanne, and I fully supported the folks that I did not want the new school. I did not want to raise taxes in Upper Hanover Township. So I'm not quite sure what Justin's referring to, the folks that I'm surrounding myself with. I'm out learning to meet new people throughout the district, everywhere. So I have been working hard to meet people, talk with people, get to learn what their opinions are and what their perspectives are and what their needs are. I'm also finding out an awful lot about what people are not feeling in terms of representation and where they're not getting support and help. And I think that's the important part. I absolutely agree that the schools that you're talking about are out of control spending. We have much more spending today going on for education and much less quality output than we've had. So we do need to fix this across the state of Pennsylvania.
General question on the pension crisis. I mean, conservatively, we're probably at $70 billion underfunded now in the pensions for the state workers and the teachers union. Municipals are better, they have their own. And this has been going on for decades, you could say. There's like 400 managers close to it running this thing, and they got 1.29% return on all the billions that they have in there. That needs addressed critically. So what's going to happen? How are you going to do this? That's it.
I think that is a tremendous problem. I think it's a problem that needs to be addressed, just as you said, John, at the manager level. The manager's level and the level where state legislators tap into those resources because they were previously well-funded. So they saw an extra pot of money and they wanted to go after it. I am a fiscal conservative Republican. I do not want to raise taxes. I will do everything in my power as your representative to keep taxes low and to fight the raising of taxes anytime those occur. So that's what I think needs to be done. It's hard work. It does not take away from the fact that people spend their life in teaching, and those folks do need to get their pension, but that has nothing to do with the way the state operates the pension level funds.
Yeah, John, I do agree with getting the pension managers out of the business is certainly a big aspect of that, and there's actually bipartisan agreement on that. So we just recently passed a pension reform bill. I'll be the first to admit to you the pension reform that did pass is a drop in the bucket. It saves us about $5 billion, and as John said, about $70 billion is the unfunded liability. What we have to do is all new employees have to be put into a defined contribution 401k system, like 90% of the private sector currently has. You can't have a system where the private sector is funding public sector pensions that the private sector doesn't get. It's unsustainable. So we have to put all new hirees into a 401k system. We need more Republicans, and we need, well, we're not going to get any Democrats, but we need more Republicans in Harrisburg that are willing to do this. Unfortunately, there's about 30 Republicans in the House of Representatives that are bought and paid for by the union that aren't willing to do it. So we need more teammates in Harrisburg to help get this job done.
Okay, maybe I'll ask another question, and we'll get to you. And this question will begin with Justin. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court, according to this questioner, exceeded its authority to redraw congressional district boundaries. What legislative action would you support to reestablish the legislature's rightful authority?
It's not necessarily legislative action that we should take to take care of this matter. What needs to happen is these justices need to be impeached. They don't need to be. We don't need legislation. We need impeachment, the process of impeachment begins in the Senate. So we have to talk to our senators, Senator Brown, Senator Bosco, and other local senators, to get on board to impeaching these justices because they overstepped their bounds. They have set a dangerous precedent where now legislative decisions are going to be in the hands of the courts. And this is just the beginning. If these Supreme Court justices don't get impeached, this is just the beginning. They're going to go to court and say we don't fund education enough, and then they're going to force major tax increases on education funding. They need to be impeached. That's the answer.
I agree that the judges need to be impeached. I don't agree with the action that they took. I don't know that that's likely to happen, however. I think a more amenable answer to how do we adjust every 10 years and redraw districting lines, I think that we need to form a commission that does that is actually a bipartisan commission, so that it is taken out of the hands of everybody that's tried to make that a politicized event. And that's what we need to do. I guess I get the next question. I'll hang on to this mic.
Anybody that's in an elected office knows they barrage them with questions on bills that are out there. One of them right now, HB 1531, very simple one. Actually, Justin's a co-sponsor on it now, after we talked about it. It has to do with agendas. As it turns out, you don't have to have a public agenda in any public meeting. It's not a law, unlike what you would think. There's a bill in this one that I just said, 1531, which says you have to have one for at least one day, 24 hours before the meeting. And then the best part, you cannot throw an addenda in. Critical part there, my wife on the school board, every teacher contract that she did was an addenda. They didn't even know. So this is languishing, and this has to do with general, languishing in committee. What will you do to make sure that things don't languish around that are very important, what I consider?
Thank you for the question, John, because I know I've had an opportunity to discuss this question with you before. And it is true that there is no requirement to have a published agenda before public meetings. I do think that has a backward impact, and people can do sneaky things or surreptitious things, which isn't right. So I do hope that that bill gets passed, and I would do more than hope. If I get elected, then what I will do is work to get those bills passed. I will attend all the sessions. I will attend all the committee meetings where that bill is discussed. I do know that that isn't always the case. There's attendance records on file for my opponent, and he has not attended many of the committee meetings. It's actually about a 74% attendance rate for committee meetings for Justin. And I don't think that that's serving the people of the 131st very well. I do think that if he's a sponsor of a bill, and I don't know where that average falls on that particular bill, but part of how you move that bill through committee is that you make certain that you show up for work.
Well, first of all, again, that's just wrong. My attendance rate, as I stated before, is 93%. Members don't attend committee meetings usually that they're not a member, a committee that they are not on. So you attend a committee meeting if your bill is on that respective committee, but you don't attend committee meetings that you're not on. So that is just factually inaccurate, what you just said.
One of my concerns in the state, in this area, is the grants. We grants, so so we get money here from other parts of the state, basically, and then pay for things in our area, and we're paying for things in other parts of the states, the grants. So you may or may not know that the county just put in beautiful legislation that the people who are applying for grants have to prove that they need the money for what the project that they're submitting. So I'm just wondering, would you consider bringing that as a state law to cut down on the wastefulness of the grants and the type of the grants, and that the people who are asking for the grants really need the money for what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely support legislation like that. I'm always for good government reform. I want to talk about the budget, though. The budget negotiations we just had this year. We, the House Republicans, found over $1 billion in off-spending, basically money that is outside the budget process that members of the legislature, specifically the Senate, are tapping into for pet projects. And we could have balanced the budget just with that pot of money. Unfortunately, the Senate did not want to go there, but we were able to get $300 million out of that to help balance the budget. So any of these offshore type of, not offshore, but off-budget type accounts need to be in the sunshine, and I would support that.
I, as well, would definitely support that. I do think that grants need to be closely looked at. They need to be scrutinized. There's no need anywhere for wasteful government. I mean, who anywhere in their home budget just has wasteful spending? You don't. And I don't think that we need to have that at the state level as well.
I know medically when people do research, when they apply to grants, they have to write and put into every penny that they spend. They are accountable for the grant. So you got that a little mixed up.
Well, that wasn't a question, that was a statement, but it was directed to you, so if you want to respond to it, you may.
I'm not sure how I got it mixed up, but I'm not even sure what the statement was, but we can proceed.
Okay. Another question?
Getting back to HBSB 76, can both of you give us a quick synopsis of what you understand about 76 and give us what the components are on how the school property taxes are going to be eliminated permanently when the people in Harrisburg finally get their act together and do something for the people?
Bev, it's your turn.
I think there's a lot of information out there about House Bill 76 and Senate Bill 76. It's been for a very long time, people have tried to pass it. The basics of it are that it reduces or eliminates property tax to fund the schools and instead swaps out an small increase in sales tax and a small increase in income tax. So it's a matter of the question is, how are you going to fund schools? I think it's very clearly a state level responsibility to take care of the education of all of our students in the state of Pennsylvania. I do think it's a question out there to be considered. I would hope to see that SB 76 goes out for public referendum. That might be a very good option. I think that the voters would be the best ones to decide about that.
Well, HB 76 isn't a constitutional amendment, so it would not go to voters for a referendum. But HB 76, she is right. It eliminates school property taxes over a period of 4 years, raises the income tax from about 3.07 to about 4.5%, raises the sales tax by 1%, and closes most of the loopholes and exemptions in the sales tax. Then what happens is every school district gets the current amount of funding they're getting right now, and then is adjusted for inflation and population growth every year, and that's it. That's their funding year in, year out for population growth and inflation. If your school district loses population, like some in the West, you then lose funding.
One of the problems with 76 and with the school districts, if you take notice of what's happening across the state right now, all the school districts are accelerating construction because with 76, they are allowed to continue school taxes to pay debt. So therefore, many of the school districts are incurring huge debt in order to be able to continue to tax. How would you propose to close that loophole?
Well, with 76, you got to take the debt portion out too of what they're allowed to do. I've always supported that. It's hard to get it's hard enough to get a majority to support HB 76, but you have to take the debt portion off as well.
I would certainly agree with that. I remember going door to door, talking with a couple of folks who graduated way long time ago, around the time of my father. And, sorry, I'll stand up again. And the one gentleman that I spoke with asked me the question. He said, I graduated from the high school, it was actually Pennsburg High School. He said, I played out on the red shale for playing football, our football field. Now we had to spend $1.6 million for a new football field so the kids can play out there on the grass. He said, why do they have to do that? Why do we have to pay the taxes for that? It's a good question. And I certainly think that that's the kind of sentiment that I would gather from all the people in the 131st and take that to Harrisburg for action.
Having failed to restrict Pennsylvania's energy future by restricting fracking, opponents of Pennsylvania Energy are now trying to restrict pipelines to get that oil and gas to the proper markets where it's needed. How would you, what would you support to facilitate more pipelines in the right places while respecting property rights?
Well, my record is clear on this issue. You know, I supported the impact fee legislation a few years ago, which also was one of the most comprehensive energy recommitment plans that we had here in Pennsylvania, which also committed to pipelines. So my record is clear on this, that as long as we're environmentally responsible and as long as we're respecting property rights, I have no problem with pipeline construction. I have no problem with fracking here in Pennsylvania either. It's an industry that has brought in over $3 billion to our state alone into our economy. The impact fee has brought over $1 billion that we've been able to reinvest into those communities where the impact is and been able to reinvest for projects across the state, including our rail trail here in Pennsylvania. So I am a supporter of responsible pipeline construction, and I'm responsible fracking as well.
I can't, there's nothing there that I could disagree with. I fully support everything that Justin said. I would do the same.
I have a question about this most recent national school walkout that took place that was a partisan political event that used our impressionable young people. Now, talking about precedent, as you did, Justin, what's next? Who's going to have another walkout? Maybe they want to do one for pro-choice or pro-life or pro-gun or pro-tax, whatever. This is not what schools should be allowing. And yet, we get pushback from the school board here saying we neither encourage or discourage. Well, by having it and allowing it, what's that called? And then the superintendent himself is out front and writing these glowing, I'm so proud of my students. So he is supporting He's encouraging. It's chaos. It's going to become chaos and anarchy if this isn't stopped. There should be a state regulation that the students, if they want to do something like that, must do it after school, off school property, and student organized. And then you'll see how many kids are going to show up.
So it's not in the form of a question, but if you have a quick response. Oh, is that your question?
Yes, she did say, what are you going to do about it?
Okay.
Yes.
That's your question. What are you going to do about that?
I couldn't agree with you more, ma'am. I'm sorry, I don't know your first name, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think it was absolutely wrong for the students at a very young, like you said, very impressionable age to be manipulated, almost persuaded into what's right or what's not right. What they're encouraged to go out and support, they're going to absorb internally. And I do think you have a very excellent idea, and I would work on that idea, because making certain that our students, if they do want to organize, that they do it themselves, that they don't fall prey to the influence of people who have a political agenda that happen to be teaching them. And I think we do need to protect our children across the board. My stand on Second Amendment, it's related to the Second Amendment. My stand on Second Amendment would be that I am pro-Second Amendment, and it isn't guns that cause problems. When you take guns away from good people, when you make good people helpless, you don't make bad people harmless. So I don't think that supporting that idea for the kids was right, but I like that idea, and I would take that action on that to protect the children from political mind influence. Absolutely.
I'm also pro-Second Amendment, as well, as evidenced by my NRA endorsement. Simply put, and I'll keep it pretty simple here, is if a teacher or administrator is caught encouraging it, they should be fired.
Just on this topic, I do have two kids who are in Emmaus High School. One chose to walk out and one chose to stay. I am proud of both of them for making that independent decision. So really, I think it's sad, though, that sometimes we forget as we're older that our children are living through this every day, and they are afraid. They don't understand all the politics or the repercussions. I get that. But I guess my question is, what can we do, or what can you both do to make them feel safer, to make them feel that they don't need to walk out, or they don't need to be as influenced? And, I am a Republican. I am a complete supporter of the Second Amendment, but I respected my daughter for walking out because she said, you don't know what it's, Emmaus has already had 2 lockdowns. She said, you don't know what it's like to be locked in a classroom and told not to talk for 3 hours while police investigate why there's bullets. So I can't blame her, and her motives aren't political. Her motives are just, we're scared, and like, what would you guys do to maybe make them not have to do that anymore?
I'm a proponent. I think schools need to be treated just like airports. Schools should be fenced in. There should be an armed guard at the door. There should be metal detectors at the door. It's an unfortunate reality that we live in a society that we have to do this now, but it's just what we have to do. And I'm a co-sponsor of legislation that actually puts $30 million into having an armed guard at every one of our schools, puts money into securing the doors and the openings to every school. But we need to treat schools like airports. And that's the only way we're going to combat this problem. Because let's face it, the people on the other side of the Second Amendment that want to have gun control, the only way you could ever change it is if you confiscated all the guns and taken them away. It's not going to happen. You're not going to have an Australia-style gun confiscation in the United States of America. It's not going to happen. And I don't want to see that happen. So we got to treat our schools like airports.
I certainly agree. Justin mentioned Australia. I do know that even though Australia enacted one of the most strict gun control measures across their nation. It hasn't changed their murder rates. It hasn't changed their mass killing rate. What people do instead is they use vehicles, they use bombs, or they use knives, and they still have the same percentage of incidents. What we have to do is make our children feel safe, like you said. Where'd you go? Oh, there you are. We have to make our children feel safe. I think it's absolutely true that we need to have metal detectors of some sort that are there. But for me, I experienced in the military a program that was enacted called Troops to Teachers. Has anybody ever heard of that? Troops to Teachers was a program where when folks leaving military duty, that they went through a fast track to get educated to become teachers. There are a lot of troops to teachers that are now teachers today. These people are capable of being armed and knowledgeable on how to handle weapons. So why are we not allowing people, teachers, administrators, or the example that went on today in, what was it, Maryland, where there was a resource advisor in school who had the ability to stop that shooter. I'll bet that child who shot is not going to do it again.
What's next? He already answered.
Get this down. I'm just hanging on to the microphone because there's another question.
The only thing I want to suggest to the audience is that come up and ask your question. Your opinions are important, but I don't think you have to phrase your question in the form of an opinion and ask, what do you think about that? Ask the question and we can shorten this. I'm getting so many questions, I'm not even going to get to them all. So I'm just keep that in your mind when you come up here and ask a question instead of offering your opinion.
All right, well, that was a perfect lead-in. I'm an Australian American. Hello. My question primarily is twofold. First of all, prima facie, are either of you supported financially or any other fiscal means by sitting Congressman Charlie Dent and or his agent? The second part of my question is relating to sick leave, because I have ADD. I'm a successful attorney. I speak 6 languages, well, 7 if you include English. Justin is a public servant, and I want to thank you for your service. I wish I honestly had the cojones to do that. But in the public sector, unfortunately, you do not get paid for sick leave and or maternity leave. And my question to you, Bev, I guess the second part of it, have you ever gone on sick leave? Have you ever gone on maternity leave? As you said earlier in your introduction that you do have 5 beautiful children. I'm just wondering that question. I mean, have you ever had in your entire professional career any amount or days of sick leave? Thank you.
Okay, so you fired off a number of different questions there, and I only have 1 minute to answer all of it. So yes, of course, when my child was born and I was on active duty, I took my maternity leave and went right back to duty. I think it was, at one point, the Air Force allowed 4 weeks maternity leave. Another point, they offered 6 weeks. I think their policies have changed from time to time, given the fact that they look into differences about how women recover after pregnancy. I also know when I was early on in the Air Force, you may not know, the folks in the room here, I attended the Air Force Academy in the first year that they let women enter. So when I was first in there, a little funny story here, I know I'm going to go past my minute, but they didn't even have the proper uniforms for us to wear. And I'm a fairly tall person, and when I was a brand new cadet, they issued all the women the same size stockings, and they insisted that we wore skirts. So I'm out there trying to run to formation with stockings that didn't actually even I couldn't pull them up. It just was not physically possible. So yes, there's definitely experience for maternity leave in the military. You asked another question. I mean, it was lost, but my time is up. Do I get 2 minutes to answer if I got 2 questions?
No.
Okay.
No. You chose the question that you wanted to answer, I suspect.
I'm definitely not supported by Charlie Dent or any of his people.
Okay.
Do I get to answer that part of the question? Because I have absolutely no financial support from Charlie Dent. But I do know that...
You just answered.
Who's all these people here for Dent?
Are you at the microphone asking a question?
No.
Point of order.
Please.
But let me just address this for a moment. I do understand, I feel often as I talk with people, there's a lot of animosity towards Charlie Dent. He's not my congressman. My congressman is Ryan Costello at the moment. And of course, all the districts have changed. So now there'll be something new there. But in looking at the past, of course, doing my homework as a candidate, I do know that Justin has taken money from Charlie Dent in the past, and he's requested Charlie Dent's help, but now there's some form of animosity going on. So I would just ask Justin, would you return the money that you took from him in the past, or perhaps maybe donate it to the folks here at CEPTA? I'm sure they could use that money instead if that's such an unfortunate thing.
Let's make a deal right now on the fly. Good politician.
Sir.
Yes.
Please don't do that. Okay. Here's something that maybe won't get people's ire up too much. Where do you stand on a constitutional convention? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Convention.
I support it, and I was a co-sponsor with my friend Steve Bloom, who's now running for Congress and the legislature, to have a constitutional amendment. There's too many issues that are being kicked down the road that are not getting addressed that I believe only a constitutional amendment will address. Reducing the size of the legislature, getting the state completely out of the liquor business, getting rid of perks for legislatures, going to a part-time legislature. All this stuff needs to be addressed in a constitutional convention. That being said, a constitutional convention needs to be limited in scope, because if you have a full-blown open constitutional convention, you then run the risk of what they call having a runaway convention. And then you could have things like, you could have disaster strike, like there being resolutions or amendments going after the Second Amendment. You don't want that. You want a strict constitutional amendment that solely focuses on those issues I just talked about. But I would support that.
I think a constitutional amendment is built in to our Constitution to be called when it is necessary, and I would support calling a constitutional amendment as well.
Sure.
Kind of, I guess the second part has been partially addressed already, but how would either of you stand on making it legal here within the state of Pennsylvania for teachers and administrators to voluntarily become armed for the protection of their students, so they can do more than just cover the students with their bodies when the bullets are being going that way?
I would fully support it, fully. I think it's very important to note that out of all of the attacks that have happened, more than 90% of our what's termed mass killings, mass shootings fall into it. There's different phrases that are used, but and the media sometimes messes up the definitions, but the folks that do the studies term mass killings. Mass killings, 90% of all mass killings occur in gun-free zones. So what we're doing instead of making it a gun-free zone is we're making it a victim-attracted zone. And so I would 100% support having voluntary teachers, administrators, whoever is operating in the schools, janitors, for heaven's sakes. If they qualify, if they're properly certified, and if they're capable, I would fully support them being armed voluntarily.
I would agree with that. I would support it.
While you do that, I'll ask another question. Question from the audience. How many years in the same position do you feel would make you a career politician? That may be a question going to term limits. So if you want to address it as term limits, we can do that.
I think that's ultimately up to the voters to decide. I think that's for the voters to decide. You know, I certainly have been criticized in my career because I actually see my former opponent in the audience. Bill, how you doing? For running against the term limit pledge, and I did break the pledge because the voters asked me to continue to run, and when that was brought up on the ballot, I won 78 to 22%. So I do think that it's ultimately up to the voters to decide. That being said, I would support term limit. I would support term limit legislation if everyone is held to the same standard. If you have it across the board for everyone.
I would certainly support term limit legislation. I do think that it's important for us to go back to what did our constitutional founders intend. For somebody like myself, I've spent a career in public service, but in the military. There are folks out there in this audience, I'm sure, who are good business people, who are teachers, who have done all kinds of things in many different walks of life. And what we need to do is to bring people with those varying expertise into Harrisburg to bring that together to help form our laws. I don't believe that term limits are the only way to stop that. I do recognize that voters have a choice. And Justin did talk about how he made a promise to do 3 terms, and this is his 5th term running. So I think it's important as well that our representatives have a background in doing something other than politics. The question talked about a career politician, and I think more than term limits, the key ingredient for a career politician is this question: have you done anything else in life other than be a politician?
Yes, this question is for you, Beverly, and I've felt moved to ask you this, but you say you're not a politician, but your campaign just did one of the most political inside moves in political history, where you question the petition of Vicki Lightcap. Even one of your relatives did. So why did you do that? And let me ask you, you don't think that is not what a politician does? I'd like to know why you did that.
Certainly, I'll be glad to explain why I did that. Vicki is here, and I am a politician now. I am running for office, so I mean I have to be by definition. Okay. The point of it is that yes, my people in the district. Actually, some of the folks as well in this room, and my father, who is my campaign manager, got together to challenge the petition of the other candidate, Vicki. There were errors in the petitions. She turned in 313 signatures. There is election law to follow. So it's a matter of turning in valid signatures of registered Republican voters that are within the district. And what happened is, by looking at the petitions and actually we didn't just look at the petitions of one, we looked at all the petitions, and there's errors in all the petitions. But what you have to do, because there's friends that help you, there's people that help you to collect signatures, what you have to be sure is that you have enough valid Republican registered voters in the district to get to the threshold of 300. That's not my requirement. That's an election law requirement.
Okay.
Just a question for what can you do, will you do about paycheck protection?
I'm a co-sponsor of the bill. We just had a vote on it back in, I believe, the end of December. And we got to about 91 votes and it didn't pass. The reason is because one, you're not going to get any Democrats to vote for it, and enough union-backed Republicans voted against it. So my question to you would be, when you, again, this is an example where you have experience and someone you can count on. I voted and put my vote up for paycheck protection, even knowing it was going to go down. There are some members that will not vote for something if they know it's going to go down. Why would you want to replace me with an unknown on that when we already have so many Republicans that aren't supporting paycheck protection, that are voting against it, that are backed by public sector unions in the Senate and in the House? I'm not one of them. You can count on me. Again, that's why I'm asking again for another term.
You want to follow up to an earlier?
I have another question.
Okay, go ahead.
I have another question. Following up on what you said, we're all defined by our past histories. 30 years in the military, excellent service. I had some experience with that. My father was. The military is not, the one that I know, is not noted for its innovative solutions and clear path to quick results. Career politicians, the same thing in Harrisburg. What could either of you two offer in the way of innovation or change in how balancing what you are from your history in order to make things happen out of the box?
Well, I think you gotta look. I do a lot of reading and I talk to a lot of business people. I'm not someone that has been in business, but I talk to a lot of business people, and that's why I like to bring up ideas like zero-based budgeting, performance-based budgeting, reducing the size of the legislature, bringing common sense, conservative, capitalistic style ideas to the legislature. So that's what I like to bring. It's not necessarily what I can bring, but when I talk to people who are in the private sector, one of the things I like to say is you are who you surround yourself with. And when you're talking to very successful people, successful in business, that's why I believe our president is doing such a good job, a successful businessman. You want to bring those ideas into the legislature, and I can be a convoy for those ideas. So I like to talk to people to bring those in.
Thank you for your time in the military. I'm wondering if you did Army? No? Oh, your father? Okay. You're right. The military isn't necessarily known for its most innovative of solutions all across the board. But I worked in the Air Force. I did space operations, satellite operations. So there are a lot of innovative techniques that go on there, a lot of leadership. So what I'd like to do is bring to Harrisburg the leadership on getting decisions made. It doesn't always mean that you have to have the best and the brightest ideas, but what you have to do is bring together people so that you work together in Harrisburg and you make change happen.
I think I may have passed over you about the paycheck protection question. Would you like to respond to that?
Certainly, I do support paycheck protection, absolutely.
Okay.
One of the main problems that I see where Harrisburg doesn't seem to get a lot done is because of the teacher unions. NEA, AFT, all sorts of alphabet letters down there connected with the unions. And I'm wondering if you are willing to accept money to support your campaigns, whether it be now or in the future, from teacher unions.
I don't think teacher unions would be interested in supporting me. I don't think that they would like my positions. My thought is that unions, teachers' unions or any unions, have a place in our history. They have a good purpose. They work to bring people together in a workplace that would not otherwise have a voice. What I don't support is when unions get politically active and when they can force the requirement of everyone that is in a workplace to contribute so that they fund. Unions have gone too far. They overreach. They extend themselves into politics where they don't belong.
Did she answer the question if she would take teacher union money?
Yeah, no.
Okay. I won't take teacher union money. Actually, in my first re-election, I was the #1 target of the teachers union, and I was proud to be that.
All right.
I have a question. Do you want to go back to your seat? I have a question for, let's start with Justin. This is a question from the audience. With 6 pieces of quote-unquote sponsored legislation passed in 7 years of time in office, do you view that as a significant accomplishment?
Yeah. I mean, I view that as a significant accomplishment, but I would only view it as a significant accomplishment, though, if these bills are good government bills or they're reducing the size of government. If you're passing legislation, you could pass 12, 13, 14 bills, but if you're increasing the size of government, no, that's not successful. So my bills have all been fiscally conservative pieces of legislation. I've had 6 pass. Have I considered that successful? Yes. The voters have also considered that successful, but ultimately that'll be up for the voters to decide.
Do you wish to respond to that? Do you wish to answer that question?
Well, I can give you my thoughts about that question, yes. Currently in Pennsylvania, the House and the Senate enjoy a pretty overwhelming number of Republicans in office. I think it's actually kind of disgraceful that our Republicans that are serving in Harrisburg haven't been able to do more and to pass better legislation for all the Republican causes that are out there. They're languishing in Harrisburg. And I don't think that there's enough production. I don't believe that the 6 pieces of legislation passed in 8 years is actually a good performance record.
But I would add, why would you go after a conservative member that is putting up the tough votes? Why not go after one that's not putting up the good votes?
Amen.
Do you wish to respond to that? Because that was out of turn, I believe. Go ahead.
It was out of turn, but I forgive him.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay. And this is directed to you, but we'll let Mr. Simmons respond as well. And it's a question from the audience. Will you give up your preferential property tax treatment and pay it back to the taxpayers if elected?
I don't consider any preferential property tax treatment. This is the same thing that everybody in Pennsylvania is able to have. It's just a matter of what your home is. You have if it's a 10 Act 319 applies to all citizens in Pennsylvania.
Mr. Simmons, do you wish to respond?
Yeah, I don't apply for Act 319, so it doesn't apply to me.
Pennsylvania has one of the largest, most expensive legislatures in the country. Do you support the movement to reduce the size of the Pennsylvania legislature?
Or make them part-time?
Yeah, and I just voted on it last week. It has to go to the Senate now. We put an amendment. It's a complicated process, but we put an amendment to reduce the size of the Senate. The Senate doesn't want to reduce their size because the Senate, in all honesty, is worthless, but it's just my opinion. The Senate doesn't want to reduce their size. Michaela, you can go text that to Senator Brown, I'm sure. But anyway, the Senate is definitely worthless. But at the same time, if you're, I do support reducing the size of the legislature. I do, but the Senate has to take out the amendment that we put in there, reducing their size. So then it has to come back to us to vote on it again. So we're going to vote on it again, and hopefully we'll have that on the ballot this November for you guys to vote on.
I would agree with that.
There's this has to do with grants and corporate welfare, I'll call them, where it's state, local, county, and municipality, mostly county, municipality, funding for projects. And when that happens, there's money's offset. They could have gotten a full 100% tax. Now they go varying, but some are 50%. That the people that are, the school district, let's say, they're willing to give up 50% of their tax so that a project goes forward. For 20 years, this happens. Now, I wanted to get your feelings on that sort of a thing, if you agree that that should happen, and if it does, do you think that the state should then keep giving them all the money since they actually voted to, we don't need this tax money? So should the state be able to offset theirs also and say, well, if you don't need $500,000 a year, we're not going to give you $500,000 to offset that. I'll let it at that.
Who's up?
Well, I believe it's my turn. And John, what I'd like to do is probably talk to you a little bit more about that afterward. Because when I acknowledge that I have spent all my time in the military and, not been in politics very long, although I do say I'm a politician, I understand that there's many different issues out there that I need to learn about and learn more about, and this is one of them. So I'd like to talk with you afterwards and get more information about that. The bottom line is, what do we do with taxes? What's the purpose of them? Why are we gathering taxes? We're gathering taxes to pay for very basic, common needs throughout Pennsylvania. And that's what we need to do. We don't make special exceptions. I don't support making special exceptions. So I'll be glad to get more details and talk that over with you. I really think that that's what's important, is to get the details of the folks that are in the community.
I don't have anything to add.
Is it true that when a vote comes to the House or the Senate, that the outcome of the vote is primarily already known, and that some of those directions have been given by leadership as to how you're going to vote on it, and would you ever vote against how the leadership tells you you're going to vote, if any of that's true?
Heck yes. The gas tax I talked about in my opening statement. Republican leadership wanted the largest gas tax increase in the history of Pennsylvania passed, and I voted no. And not only did I vote no, but we killed the bill twice. And they brought it back on a reconsideration motion. So to tell you how things happen in Harrisburg. But no, I would absolutely vote against leadership. It's not necessarily true that the outcome of a bill is known. Most bills it is true, but a lot of bills, they do go in somewhat close on the vote and they don't know. But yeah, there are a lot of people that are driven by leadership. But again, one of the reasons why I'm asking for another term is I've always been independent of the leadership and voted for the people of the 131st District, come hell or high water.
Obviously, I don't have any allegiances already, certainly not with people in leadership or anywhere in Harrisburg. And I have been an independent thinker all my life, an independent actor all my life, and in many cases I'm considered as somebody who actually goes against the grain and swims upstream. So I would have absolutely no problem voting against leadership. The last thing I want is for somebody to tell me how I'm going to vote in Harrisburg. Thanks.
My question, just real quick, was you had just mentioned that the leadership or somebody came to you to vote, and that you decided, oh, no, not to vote, to run. You're not invited to them?
No, the folks that came and invited me is HRCC. That's House Republican Campaign Committee. Once Justin actually returned to the seat to run for this office instead of running for U.S. Congress, they told me they could no longer support me because it's their obligation by charter to support an incumbent. So they do support Justin currently. The House Republican Campaign Committee is designed to keep incumbents in office. That's their job. When Justin had declared to run for U.S. Congress, the seat was vacant, and so HRCC's job in a vacancy anywhere in the state of Pennsylvania is to look for and to recruit good quality candidates that are good, strong Republicans, and that's what they originally came to me for. This was after October. So, does that answer your question? You look confused.
I don't care how it happened or what happened since then. They came to you, so you feel you're not affiliated with any
No, because they actually told me, I'm sorry, we can no longer support you. Justin's back in the race, and they owe their support to Justin. So maybe he should answer that question.
No, I said it to you. Justin didn't say he was nominated by somebody else.
Okay.
So speaking of congressional race, I guess it's 6 or 7 months ago, Justin, you had the courage, some might call it the nerve, to announce that you would run against Charlie Dent. And for that, I'd like to personally thank you, because 24 hours later, I believe it was 24 hours later, Charlie announced that he would no longer run. I was especially pleased because Charlie had been touting at that point that he was a never-Trumper. The problem is that in November of 2016, we actually elected Donald Trump, and an agenda at that time. Now, I understand that the agenda that Donald Trump ran on was primarily relates to the federal government. However, we all understand that state governments need to interact with federal law and either support or not support federal law and policy. So my question for each of you is, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not at all and 10 is fully, to what extent do you support the agenda that Donald Trump articulated? I don't know whose turn it is.
I think it might be Justin's.
I'm a 10. I support the president and the agenda. I support securing the border, build that wall. I support the tax cuts. I support repealing Obamacare. Unfortunately, we had some Republican congressmen, like the incumbent congressman, who did not uphold that pledge when he voted against it. But we're draining the swamp, baby.
I can say I'm a very proud supporter of Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. I voted for Donald Trump, and I'm definitely a 10 on the scale of supporting his agenda. Absolutely.
Okay, so appears to be no other questions, except for one that each of you can ask the other. Is there another question?
Hi, Justin. Hi, Beverly. Justin, you ran on, and we respect greatly your pledge not to accept your retirement, your pension rather, and per diem and the other expenses. Do you continue to pledge that? And Beverly, will you withdraw your rights to per diem and other expenses and pension?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't take the pension. I will continue not to take the pension. I don't take the per diem. I don't take the state car. I don't take the cell phone. I don't take any of those perks afforded to legislators, and I will continue to uphold that.
I have no reason to want the pension or to take any of these. I don't even know what they are. Frankly, I haven't even looked into that, because this is not why I'm running. I'm running to serve the people here in this district. So I'm not even, I mean, these items that seem to be so troublesome, I'm certainly glad to consider them and not take them, but they're not even on my radar scope because I'm not worried about them.
So do you pledge not to take the retirement and the per diem and the expenses?
If that's important to you, absolutely, I pledge that.
Well, I want to know if,
Yes.
if it's something you can guarantee.
Yes, I pledge that.
Justin has consistently pledged that.
Okay.
Thank you both.
Okay, so I don't make that mistake again. Are there any other questions? Not seeing anyone raising their hands or standing up. So what we're going to do, before we have the closing statements, we're going to give you the opportunity to ask a question of each other. And we'll start with Justin.
Beverly, I've opposed all of Governor Wolf's tax increases. I have voted for pension reform. I have voted for liquor privatization. I have voted for paycheck protection. I'm consistently ranked as one of the most conservative members in the State House of Representatives, as evidenced by the endorsements I've gotten from the Pro-Life Federation and the NRA. Which of these conservative policies do you oppose that I have been espousing, and why do you think we need a new rep?
I will be glad to answer the question, Justin. I don't oppose any of the conservative policies that you've supported. I'm actually very strongly in favor of all of those policies. And the reason I'm running is because the people that I've spoken to have told me that they would like a different choice, that they would like new representation. They would like someone that shows up to work all the time. That's what I've been told. So.
Okay, and do you have a question for Justin?
My question for Justin would be more along the simple lines of a basic kind of an interview question. I would say, what, in the last 8 years as a legislator, what is your biggest regret?
Honestly, I'll be honest with you, the biggest regret I made was making the term limit pledge. I made that when I first ran. I thought we would be able to get more done in 3 terms with a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, but I found out that there were too many union-backed Republicans, and that was the biggest regret I had.
So now we're going to go to your closing statement. Each of you will have 5 minutes, and we'll start with Justin.
Thank you, and thank you to the moderator and to CEPTA tonight for allowing us to have this debate. I think it's always important that we don't get lost as incumbents, that we continue to come out and speak to the people and talk about the issues that are important to them. And again, I would like to thank Beverly for attending tonight and thank Beverly for her service to our great country again. I certainly don't doubt that she has good intentions for our district. As I stated in my opening statement, I believe that this race does come down to someone who is a committed conservative and someone who is not a committed conservative, who has not been tested. And let me tell you, it's one thing to talk a good game about being a conservative, but many people, when they get to Harrisburg or they get to Washington, D.C., they change. They change. And that's why I'm asking you for another term, because I haven't changed. You know, I've made mistakes. I certainly have owned up to the absences, and I've talked about some of my mental health conditions. I've certainly talked about the term limit issue, but I voted conservative, and I voted the way I said I would vote. And just because someone espouses that does not mean they're going to. So in today's society, when we see so many, for lack of a better term, rhinos, Republicans in name only, moderate Republicans that don't want to do anything, why would you want to take out one of your own? One that's actually a conservative, that's actually going out there and putting up the tough votes and doing the co-sponsorships. That's why I said I don't really understand what the point of the primary is because I am a conservative. And if we don't disagree on certain things, what's the problem? You know, the last primary that we had, it was 78 to 22%. I'm not sure I've seen an election that lopsided in the history in Pennsylvania, to be honest with you, when you had a contested race. So, you know, I'm continuing to run because the people have asked me to. The results have been overwhelmingly in my favor. And I will continue to run until the people decide they get sick of me. So I would appreciate one more term. Thank you.
Thank you as well to the folks who invited me to participate this evening, to Justin for being here, for the hosts for this meeting. I'm glad that we're drawing this to a close. I also am concerned about what's going on outside for the weather and everybody's safety traveling home. I am in this race because I have been asked to start this race, and once I was asked and I met people, so many people have asked me to continue. I think that there's much that needs to be done in the 131st District. There's a lot that hasn't been paid attention to. I think the voters out there realize that. I know in some ways, Justin may think that I'm the enemy, the opponent in this race, but I believe in reality, Justin's facing his own record as his opponent in this race. And so what I'm doing is presenting an alternative to the folks that are out there in the 131st district. I think that I am new to this process. I am the outsider, and I think that's good. I think that's healthy and refreshing. We need that newness in Harrisburg. We need people who can go to Harrisburg with life experience, with leadership experience, with decision-making experience, and with forming groups and getting people to cooperate and work together to actually accomplish very important things for this district. So I appreciate very much your support. Thank you to our Otto and to our moderator, and good luck to everyone out there and safe travels home.
Well, that concludes our candidates night, and I want to thank all of you for coming, and I'd like you to give both of them a warm, enthusiastic round of support.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out this evening, but I especially, on behalf of CEPTA, would like to thank Colonel Bowser and Representative Simmons for coming out tonight and giving us your points of view. We wish you the best of luck in your campaign endeavors and everything else. So, thank you. Another announcement, next month, CEPTA is trying to arrange another debate on the 134th District. Ron Beitler has agreed. Unfortunately, so far, Representative McKenzie has not committed to coming, but we will have Ron Beitler, and if McKenzie changes his mind, we'll have a debate. So with that, then, I got a note here that the temperature is mild, no freezing, no snow, little rain. So, but with that in mind, please be careful going home this evening. Thank you.